engineering.
Oh, yeah.
So what do you do?
I am a civil engineer there, but only been there for about 3.5 years now. I've only been graduated for 3.5 years now, so trying to learn the ropes.
Yeah.
We all good job.
Sure.
You gotta press it. Okay, it's 7 o'clock, so I'd like to call the October 26, 2023 Lowestoft Township Planning Commission meeting to order. First, we'll start with roll call. I'm Craig Kaloji, chairman. Tom Carochi. Here. Chris Nagy. Chris is absent. Haza Jazi. Here. Doug Woosnam. Here. Jeff Schnell. Here. And Jennifer Peters.
Here.
We can all stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Two items of business before we get started on the agenda. First of all, Jennifer Peters would like to make a statement.
Sure. Jennifer Peters, due to a conflict of interest,
Can't hear you.
Microphone.
Due to a conflict of interest, I'll be recusing myself. I am employed by St. Luke's.
So, and that's, you're recusing yourself, Jennifer, from the Bethlehem Landfill Company discussion and vote, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, there was, on an earlier agenda, there was an informal sketch plan for a project on Fire Lane. If anybody's here for that tonight, they have withdrawn from tonight's agenda, so they will not be presenting.
Yeah, the applicant couldn't make it this evening, so it'll come back before you at some point
Yeah.
in the future.
Is that gonna be like rescheduled then?
So just keep an eye on the published agendas, and when they resubmit or when they ask to be heard again, it'll show up on the agenda. So just keep an eye on that. So that's, at this point, it's just a sketch plan, so there wouldn't be any formal actions taken anyway, but yeah, just keep an eye on the agenda.
But it's gonna be up to the applicant as to when we can, if he asks for it to be heard by planning and when it can be.
Before you get started, Craig, if I could just briefly point out to the planning commission and members of the audience, the reason that we're here this evening regarding the application submitted by the Bethlehem Landfill Company. The purpose of tonight's meeting is for the planning commission to review and discuss the application and submission, and to make a recommendation to council regarding whether or not the application meets the township zoning, saldo, and other applicable ordinance requirements. So I know there's been a lot of discussion about this issue over the past couple of years. However, this meeting's purpose is to see if the application meets the ordinance requirement. It's not about whether landfills are a good idea or a bad idea. It's about whether the application meets the requirements.
And this is meeting the requirements of the recently adopted ordinance.
Yes, it's the zoning ordinance that was recently adopted, as well as other portions of the zoning ordinance and the saldo. And that's why you have a Hanover Engineering review letter that was issued going through those sections, and that's primarily the purpose of tonight's discussion.
Okay, all right. Any questions on that from the commission? Okay, thanks. All right, so we'll move into the public comment for items that are on the agenda. So we just have the one item tonight on the agenda, the Bethlehem Landfill Company. So, we have some.
Got the sheet?
Yeah. Do we ever do the roll call?
Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
So we have a sign-in sheet, and so we'll,
Are they gonna present?
The agenda item is public comment prior to their presentation. If you want to postpone it until after, we could do that as well. It's up to you.
It doesn't matter to me.
well, you know,
I mean,
let's do
their
that.
presentation,
Okay.
I mean, I would think that they wanna present first.
Yeah, let's have them present first, and then move on to public comment. Please state your names and who you represent.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Mary Ann Barber, and I'm outside legal counsel for Bethlehem Landfill Company.
And Joe McDowell with Martin & Martin, project engineer.
Okay. Yes, you want to- So we have a letter from Hanover, an October 19th review letter. I don't know if you want to just give a general overview of the project, or if you want to go in and address the letter.
Thank you, yeah, so I thought, so we're here on the preliminary land development and lot consolidation plan for the Phase 5 expansion. We submitted that on September 11th, and there was a planning commission meeting in September. We had not yet gotten a review letter from Hanover because of the timing, but we did ask permission to come and present sort of the overall project to the planning commission last month. And I know that everybody wasn't there to hear that, so I thought we would start out with sort of an overall review presentation of the project, generally speaking, and then we can talk about the Hanover engineering letter, which we got on Friday of last week.
Okay.
We had appeared before the Planning Commission back in January 2023 with regard to the Phase 5 expansion in the context of a conditional use application and a proceeding that was required under a prior version of the zoning ordinance. And at that point in time, the project that we were proposing was for 117 acres of disposal area. And we walked through that conditional use plan with this Planning Commission back in January. Since then, we've reduced the size of the disposal area that we're proposing for Phase 5. So it's gone from 117 acres to 86 acres. And Joe is going to walk us through all of the details of the project, but just to sort of give you a lay of the land, the footprint is now 86 acres. It's further away from the Lehigh River, further away from Bull Run, so we pulled it back to the south. And that also allowed us to increase the amount of conservation easement area that we've been able to offer to the township. Now, you may remember when we were here back in January, we talked about what we were going to propose to offer to the township. We have since offered all of the conservation easement area to the township, 193 acres in total, and that was accepted by the township at their August 30th meeting. So that's conservation easement acreage that is currently in place. And we do have a visual that I can pull up if the commission is interested in seeing where that conservation easement area is. The plan that's on the screen right now shows the conservation easement area on the two parcels on which the expansion is going to be located, but that conservation easement area extends to the west and to the southwest for a total of 193 acres. Is that something that you'd like us to pull up?
If you do have a graphic of that.
We do, so let me just turn that out.
I think it's that one, Marianne, that exhibit D.
D, yes, thank you. Nope, that's not it.
Well,
Apologies, just give us a second to go back up to the conceptual. Okay, go back to 17A and we'll work with this.
see, I think that one shows it, the hatched area.
Yes, it's a little bit hard to see on this, but Joe, can you use your,
The area that Marianne's references is this hatched area here is the conservation easement area. So it runs through Motorcycle Club, and then the properties to the west of the current landfill is roughly in this area right here. So the Phase 5 expansion is shown on this mapping with this orange boundary here. So you can see its relationship to the existing conservation easement areas that are shown in the hatching.
can you go back to the, thank you, sorry for the confusion there.
What was the blue color on that map?
Can we go back? So the blue color, this is an overlay of the proposed disposal area and the conservation easements that were accepted by the township, overlaid on a visual from the township's multi-municipal comprehensive plan to that it is consistent with that plan. The blue area that you see is in the comprehensive plan, and that's noted as industrial development area. And so we had prepared this exhibit to show that what we're proposing is consistent with that particular plan in the multi-municipal comp plan. So everything that you see in purple is what the comp plan says is proposed for industrial area.
So just to follow up with that easement, who is going to be the easement holder?
So the township is named as the easement holder, and Link, I don't know if you want to speak to the third party.
The township is the primary easement holder, and the township is searching for a third party that would also be required. However, the easement documents all require that court approval be obtained before they are lifted, if they're ever lifted in the future, so.
Okay. Yeah, because we had talked earlier, when this first came up, about having a third party be a party to that easement as a.
The township manager has been contacting various different conservation type agencies to see if we can get somebody to be a third party, but it's also in the document that it needs court approval to change any belt and suspenders.
And it looks like the areas to the west, those shaded areas to the west, those were lands that the landfill had acquired over the years.
Yes.
For because years ago, there was an expansion plan that moved to the west, closer to Steel City.
Correct.
So this would preclude any expansion in that direction.
Absolutely. So the properties directly to the west are owned by Bethlehem Landfill Company. The property to the north, where Joe is pointing, that's actually a property owned by the Bushkill Valley Motorcycle Club, and we have an agreement with the Motorcycle Club pursuant to which they've agreed to put a conservation easement on that portion of their property, so it will not be developed in any way. So the disposal footprint has gotten smaller, the conservation easement area has gotten bigger, but otherwise the project is as we described it to you back in January, in that it is going to allow for continuation of the Bethlehem landfill with no change in their operations. It's the same type of waste, it's the same amount of waste that they're allowed to accept on a daily basis, so there's no increase in what we're allowed to take, either in type or amount. It's the same days of operation, the same hours of operation. It's the same access road that the waste trucks and our employees will be using. We did acquire a property to the east. Joe, if you can show that. So that's what people call the former tank farm property. And that has a driveway associated with that that's existing. And we're proposing to use that driveway for emergency access and maintenance, but not for trucks or employees or anything about our ongoing business operation. So same access, same equipment. So really it's just a continuation of the existing business as it has been operating in the township for many, many years. We're here for preliminary land development approval. This project is also going to require a major permit modification to the site's DEP solid waste permit. That is a rigorous, robust, very long review process. We have not yet submitted our application to do that, but that will be the next step once we get, if we are given preliminary land development approval, then the next step, probably within the next 7 to 10 months.
7 to 10 months, we need to do some additional groundwater testing.
Then we would be submitting that DEP application. We need to come in ultimately and get final land development approval from the township, and that final land development approval would be conditioned upon us obtaining not only the major permit modification to our solid waste permit, but any other permits that would be required. For example, any permits required with respect to wetlands or anything to that effect. So that's sort of the process, and we're here for preliminary land development. As we discussed, we have the Hanover letter, but I think at this point it would make sense, Jim, if you could bring up the other visual, and we'll have Joe walk you through the details of the project, and then we can walk through the letter, the
Okay.
salient parts of the letter.
And this is sheet 11 of 29. It's not the exact sheet that's in the set. We have made some changes to that. We've added some color for presentation. We've also taken off some detail from what is in sheet 11 of 29 on the set, but we're trying to use this as an exhibit that can be easier read by everyone. So at the top of the page is the Lehigh River, Riverside Drive. Bottom of the page here is Apple Butter Road. The existing landfill is located approximately in this area, it's shown here in white. We have cell identifiers on that area. The last approval was associated with the northern realignment here, these 3 cells. This was the last approval that we saw through the township. Prior to that, there was a southeastern realignment that was generally located in this area. The proposed expansion, the proposed lateral expansion, as Mary Ann discussed, of being 86 acres, is encompassed and shown here by this gray or purple area in this location, as well as we have a small expansion laterally over here to the west. As Mary Ann said, the total is 86 acres. There's about 82 here, a little over 82, about 3.5 here, as far as expansion is concerned. If we talk about this area to the west first, this is proposed in order to close off the existing landfill to the west. As we just discussed, there was previous plans for a western expansion in this area. So what we call as intermediate grades were put in this area here, waste was placed, and so this lateral expansion will allow us to close that off at final grades meeting all regulatory requirements without the benefit of any waste relocation. So there will be some additional waste placed here to allow that to be closed off and meet all the regulations of the state and to get final grade slopes in this area. So this is part of that expansion, and the only reason for that expansion is to close that area off. The vast majority of phase 5 is located here. For reference, the existing landfill office scale is located here off of Apple Butter Road. This is the current access to the landfill for our waste trucks, employees, and operations. This will continue to be the access off of Apple Butter Road. We propose to extend an access road around the perimeter of the phase 5 expansion to access the cells for waste placement, and then continue a road around the entire perimeter of the facility as maintenance facility. So roughly from about this area back here to the southeastern tie-in will be the main access and whole route to the cells. From this point up around and tying into the northern area, those will be just maintenance roads for access. As part of this expansion, there is a MSE berm, mechanically stabilized earthen berm or wall, that is proposed roughly in this area, if I can point to that, that runs through here. Average height on that wall is 50 feet. 50-foot elevation change that occurs along this line with an MSE berm or wall.
And that will be vegetated.
That'll be have a vegetated face. There are existing MSE berms or walls. That one is located here, which was developed as part of cell 4F. Also as part of the southeastern realignment, there was an MSE berm or wall placed roughly in this location. From a stormwater management standpoint, there are 2 large basins here shown in blue that are proposed to collect the vast majority of the phase 5 expansion area. As fill is placed in this area of expansion, for every 25 vertical feet of elevation, we would have what we call a bench to direct water runoff laterally. And so there would be collection benches along the face of the landfill that would direct it to these two locations for treatment and then discharged from the site. The structures that would serve the Phase 5 expansion are generally located here. We show those in yellow. There are two proposed leachate storage tanks. Those tanks are in the process of being sized. We think we have adequate reserved area for that. There's an analysis that has to be done through development of the landfill to determine the amount of leachate that would be generated through the process of development. And one that I can talk a little bit about, how this facility would be developed. We would not go in and remove all of the existing, the vast majority of this footprint is wooded. We would not go in and remove everything inside this red boundary. From a woodland standpoint, we would clear cut everything. Our proposal, and we have this outlined on, no, I lost my pointer here. Okay. Maybe I'm running low on battery. There we go. So our starting point for this northeastern area is cell 5B.
5A first.
Yeah, 5A is first, this western area that we discussed. This is cell 5A. 5B is located here. This would be our initial development area. So in order to develop this cell of the landfill, there would be clearing of the woodlands, generally in this area here, in order to develop the infrastructure to support the cell development, including the stormwater management facility, and then that portion of the MSC berm that would be required to support development of the cell. So this MSC berm runs laterally roughly here. That construction would generally stop about here to allow for this initial cell development. And then as this is developed through excavation, we would construct the perimeter infrastructure to serve it. Then waste would be placed over time. Once we reach a final grade, that would be capped, and then the next cell would be developed. So as we develop the landfill as an expansion, it is essentially piecemeal in that this piece would be cleared, developed, then we would move to the next piece, and so on and so on and so on. And there's, I think, 9 different cells as we go through the entire Phase 5 expansion to the northeast.
And Joe, when you're in any given cell, can you just briefly describe how that cell is built out in that, like what is the size of an active disposal area at any given time, and what are the coverage requirements for that?
Yeah, so as we develop the cell, we would initially place the liner system, which the top end of the liner system would be protective cover, which would be aggregate, prior to placement of any waste. And then there would be a waste placed on a daily basis. That waste would be covered. The area that waste is being placed, as we call the active area, is a small postage stamp of that total cell as we go through the process of filling each individual piece. So there is a stage approach to it in that we place the waste, cover that waste on a daily basis, and then additional waste as we rise in elevation. Generally, there was a question I think last time about height. Generally, we're 150 feet from bottom elevation, which is not quite clear at this point, to the top elevation in any given individual cell.
Joe,
That ranges as you move from north being the top of the page here, south being the bottom. The north side is the lower side of the site, and then as far as height at the top side towards the south end of the facility, there will be a ridge line roughly about in here of elevation 725, what we call 725. That's 725 feet above sea level. That will tie in, and that is the maximum permitted elevation allowable on the existing landfill, and that will continue through the Phase 5 expansion. So generally, there will be a ridge developed roughly in this area, everything's sloping to the north. There's a small area in here that slopes to the south. Most of that goes to this facility here, but we are directing some of that to an existing basin that's located here called Basin 2. With regard, while we're talking about basins, there's a Basin 6 that is located here, and that is going to collect the runoff, stormwater runoff from that western expansion area.
Joe, just going back to the sequencing of the cell build out, once any given cell is full, can you just describe what the cover requirements are, and in terms of vegetation, how does that work?
Yeah, so once we fill the cell, then there would be the placement of a cap, a liner cap atop that, and then the last placement there is 24 inches of soil, and then the current closure system calls for grass vegetation to be placed. We have had some discussions, not only with this one, but in the past, about additional vegetation of shrubs, trees, flowers, wildflowers, those types of things. And so that, we're evaluating that as far as a possibility in this location.
The limitations, the primary limitation on the vegetation that we can put on the cap is that it has a shallow enough root system so that it doesn't compromise the cap. But, beyond that, there are lots of creative things that can be done that we're happy to discuss.
I think also integral to the stormwater management system that is proposed for the expansion is these green circles that you see here in this area, roughly in this area here, a smaller one here, and then some additional ones located down through here. Those are all trees being proposed as part of the project. In total, there's a little over 4,000 trees being proposed. Those are not, whips. Some people say those are meeting the requirements of the ordinance, 2-inch, 2.5-inch caliper trees, 5 foot in height at the time of planting. So those would all be developed. So as Marion was saying, as this cell is developed and we reach final grade and close these areas off, to the extent we can develop those trees would be developed at the same time that are adjacent to the cells as they develop. So those trees would develop over time with the cell development as well.
Joe, can you also just, sorry.
Sorry, quick question. The ridge that you spoke about, that's the highest point, I presume.
Correct.
That is closer to the bottom down here?
Yeah, it's roughly through here. The existing ridge on the landfill is roughly in here, and then that ridge would continue across here.
If that's your highest point, does that give you, you're the engineer, does that give you enough length for your steep slope? Don't you have much steeper slope from that ridge coming down?
Coming down this way?
Yeah.
Well, the existing grade in this area is higher. So in total, I think it's about 325 feet of elevation difference on existing grade. And the existing grade peak elevation is roughly in this area.
Okay.
So as that peak moves, now we have slope to head everything to the south.
Okay.
As needed. On the top of the facility as part of final grading, we need to maintain a 3% slope across the top ridge. So there'll be a flat area on top before we hit the 3-to-1 slopes with the benching down the side that, you can see already on the existing landfill in this area, if you're familiar with the views there. So it would look the same, but in the top here, there would be a flatter plateau. It has a 3% slope, which is what you might see in a parking lot.
Okay.
So it's fairly flat in comparison to the overall terrain.
These alternative vegetation approaches that you talked about, would that apply to the entire landfill?
Well, what is already closed is already vegetated. Whether we would go in and put supplemental vegetation on existing closed areas of the landfill, I mean, I think we'd be open to discussion about that, but that's already closed and vegetated, so what we will be talking about here is phase 5.
Yeah, so as part of the current permitting for the landfill, there is an approved closure plan through DEP. If we were to propose any changes with that, we'd have to go back through the DEP process to get those approvals with the Northeast region. So we'd have to get their buy-in if we were to do any different type of capping and vegetation that is currently allowable by the project.
Yeah, I only ask if you are gonna try and do something maybe a little more innovative or more naturally looking, I think it would make sense to apply that to the entire site rather than just a portion of it.
Joe, can you explain what the green color is, particularly on the southeastern portion of the property?
Yeah, so this solid green area is representative of existing woodlands that are to remain undisturbed. So there is no disturbance proposed, no tree removal or anything proposed in these green areas that you see around the perimeter of the development. That extends here down the natural gas pipeline, and then on both sides of Bull Run and the entire area along Riverside Drive, as well as this piece through here where the overhead electric lines are. So that green area is representative of areas that are to remain undisturbed. In this area where the hatching is indicated, those would be protected through a conservation easement as well. But the disturbance is a little bit further, the limit of disturbance is a little bit further south than what that hatching is. So that conservation easement, I'm losing my battery I think here, but that conservation easement stops here. We're 100 feet back from that, so a buffer between that conservation easement and where the limits of disturbance are for the proposed grading associated with phase 5. In addition to the 100 feet, we're also further back from where actual waste disposal would be. The closest point to a property line to any waste disposal is 400 feet. I think the ordinance allows for up to 100 feet to the property line where a 400 foot distance.
And can you also just explain the white area around the proposed tanks as well as that supplemental landscaping that's proposed?
Sure. In this area, in the late 70s, there was development which occurred here. There were 2 large tanks that were developed, along with some concrete pads and accesses and all of the things servicing those tanks. I've come to understand that those tanks were used for fuel oil storage. 8 million gallons, I believe, for each tank is what I heard was reported. Those tanks are ultimately to be removed.
And just to be clear, we had thought, they were scheduled to be removed. We thought they had been removed. They're still in place. Mr. Croce had asked a question about, because we had thought that they were removed, whether there was any sort of investigation upon the removal. There certainly will be when they're removed. And in addition, when Bethlehem Landfill Company acquired the property, there was a phase 1 that was conducted of the property. And there was no evidence of any releases from those tanks and no evidence of any soil or staining or soil or anything like that.
So this area right here was developed, again, in the late 70s. Everything that you see here roughly in white is currently impervious areas of either concrete pads, tanks, lined lagoons, a myriad of things. And so our proposal here is to remove that impervious area, reestablish grass vegetation in that area, not only in this area as shown by white, but also areas like this that are shown in white. Those would ultimately be vegetated. We struggled with getting too many greens on the plan that it gets confusing, but this area would all be vegetated, and we're even adding some additional trees here as part of the landscape plan. So the net result from the Phase 5 development by removing that impervious area is actually a reduction in impervious area over the whole 503 acre property. I guess I would point out too, we talked about outside permits. There are some existing wetlands that are roughly located in this area. They're the smaller wetlands, but wetlands nonetheless, and there are some streams that were identified in here. Those streams were identified by meeting the definition of DEP's stream, which is having a defined bed and bank. So when we say stream, you envision Bull Run, flowing stream. These are not flowing streams. They have no base flow to them, but they do show indications of a defined bed and bank, so that we've identified those along with the wetlands. And as part of the Phase 5 expansion, we will have to seek what's called a joint permit between DEP and the Army Corps of Engineers to be able to impact those and provide appropriate mitigation for those impacts. So this expansion, as it's envisioned here, relies upon obtaining that permit.
Quick question. The tank area, did you say the tanks are still there?
The tanks are still there. I think
Taking them
we
down?
reported, I think not only at this meeting, but at the EAC, that we thought they were already removed. That is not the case. They still exist. And, they are planned for removal. And, when those tanks are removed, they'll be removed by a certified operator for their removal. And as part of that removal, there would be some testing that would be done once they're removed to ensure that there were no leaks associated with those tanks in the past. As Marianne said, there was a study done previously when the landfill took over ownership of that, and that analysis looked at the entire property that we call the tank farm, about 89 acres, and reported no concerns or any environmental concerns.
Yeah, the Phase 1 is not typically gonna show you anything really, but once you do the tank closure, you're gonna need to take samples and have a closure report, and
Yeah.
it'll indicate if there's any impact on the system or not.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, and they're on the registry as tanks, most storage tanks, so that'll be a process we'll have to go through.
Thank you.
Were those tanks supplied via pipeline?
I don't know. As I read through the report, there was some indication that there was a pipeline that served those. At the time the report was done, and I think there was one, I think it was 2019 or 18 when this latest report was done, but there was one that was done previously, and that line had been cut, and there was a visual indication that there appeared to be no leaks or staining of any soils or any indicators of environmental concerns.
I just have one question, and maybe this is a question you can answer. Who, at the end of the day, is gonna make sure that all the trees that are being promised, the 4,000 trees are being planted, who's gonna oversee that?
I think the answer is it's kind of a joint project. DEP has jurisdiction to make sure that the plan looks like the plan that they approved, and the township has jurisdiction to make sure the plan looks like the plan that we approved. So, both, DEP and the township.
I'm a developer, so I know how, and my projects are relatively short, 2-3 years, I'm walking out the door, but everybody who was sitting in the room when I made all my promises is still there 2 or 3 years when I'm done to make sure everything I promised is going in. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking this could be years down the road, maybe none of us will be here.
Well, we will have to post security with the township for all of the landscaping that's
So be
proposed.
bonded.
Yes.
There's a requirement to replace dead or dying trees, right, that don't survive.
Yeah, I think there's a standard agreement
will say, because there will be a certain mortality rate with those trees, that they're, Longwood Garden is actually doing a reforestation study right now, and they're experimenting with different sized trees and understory plants, and that might be a good resource to go to for coming up with a successful reforestation. Just following up on a comment about the stormwater, the new stormwater basins. You talked about treatment and discharge. So what type of treatment is involved with the stormwater?
So the major aspect of the treatment aspect for stormwater is the benching off of the landfill. In total, there's about 7 miles of vegetated channel in the end, once we have all of the benches developed. So one, it is collecting that, running that through vegetation, a vegetated channel, and then conveying that to an extended retention stormwater management facility. So in that facility, there is evapotranspiration that's occurring, as well as through the vegetated channels that are conveying it. So those are the main aspects of the treatment. We talked about, and we've talked about this a number of times on previous expansions about infiltration. Is that a good idea? Is that not a good idea? We always went on the side of the conservative approach to say, let's not promote infiltration, but let's not line the basins as well. So, will there be some infiltration? Likely, but that the stormwater management plan does not rely upon infiltration for its function.
So is there any monitoring of the water quality monitoring of the discharge?
Absolutely, yeah. So there is currently a NPDS permit for industrial activities, which is the landfill, that currently monitors all of the discharge points from the existing landfill. Upon development of the new discharge points, that permit would be modified and those monitoring points would be identified and put into the regime of continued testing and reporting.
Is that done monthly or quarterly or after every storm, or what's the frequency for that?
I believe it's quarterly, but I can check on that and let you know if it's a monthly. I feel like it's quarterly, but that'll be a modification. It's part of the permit, but that happens really after the development of the facility. Sure. Once the monitoring can take.
So is there any benchmarking done of the street, where the discharge will be, if it's going to Bull Run? Is there any benchmarking of current water quality versus, pre and post development type monitoring?
I'm not aware of any requirement for that, but I believe DEP does that as part of their benchmarking for our discharge criteria. So that they evaluate the waters of the Commonwealth of Bull Run, understanding TMDLs or any type of pollutants that are both Bull Run, Lehigh Valley, or Lehigh River, and that becomes part of the permit regime for discharge criteria.
And have you ever encountered, if a certain water quality measure is being exceeded or degraded? Have you dealt with that before in any other situations?
I mean, as far as violations of that permit,
or just, so there's actually permit criteria for the storm basin discharges as well?
Yes.
Okay. So a violation, is there additional treatment methods you incorporate, or would?
Sure, depending on, what is encountered, there are additional, criteria that's put in place that can go from, we've had sites that, have unique types of discharges from industrial activities, so those, in some instances have a full wastewater treatment system that you would see that is incorporated and designed for all stormwater discharges from their site, or just try to segregate what is causing the pollution. So yeah, absolutely, I think DEP monitors that, there's reporting that has to be done, there's criteria that's set. And so, you know, any exceedances of those are subject to notice of violation and requirement upon, you know, maintaining that permit to continue the industrial operation. One must come in compliance with it.
Are there any other questions right now, or should we move to the Hanover letter?
Yeah,
Not the letter.
jump into the letter now.
Okay.
Unless there's anything else.
So, with respect to the Hanover letter, the comments are largely technical engineering comments. And we've looked at the letter, and we will be addressing all of those technical comments. There are some items in need of clarification, but I thought it probably made sense for us to walk through what are more planning type comments, I think, that are, you know, that we have some responses to that we can let the committee know about tonight. But we're obviously going to be preparing a submittal in response to this letter with all of the necessary revisions to the plans.
Yeah, that's good. I've identified some of those
Oh,
as
good.
well. That would be beneficial maybe to discuss with the plan.
Oh, well, do you wanna, you wanna
Yeah,
walk through?
if you'd like, I'll hit those items, and then if you have other
Perfect.
ones you'd like, we can do that. The first one that I've identified under subdivision land development ordinance is comment number 2. I was not sure which fire department was gonna cover the expanded area, but I think either Lower Saucon or the city of Bethlehem, somebody should look at this with respect to the fact that there are no hydrants proposed in the new area, and that access road, if they need to get back in there for whatever reason, is pretty tight, and the turns are pretty tight, so I'd like somebody from the fire department to weigh in on that.
So under the amended and restated host agreement, and in fact, under the earlier versions of the host agreement, it's the city of Bethlehem that has primary responsibility for fire. Lower Saucon has primary responsibility for police. And so we will reach out to City of Bethlehem fire chiefs, provide him or her with a copy of the plan, and we'll get the feedback on that. In terms of providing the plan to the Lower Saucon Township Police, is that something that we should do independently, or is that something that the township will do?
Has that
We
been
do,
done?
don't we, Jim?
I believe
Do
that
we give it to the police?
Yeah, that's where we've done.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll wait for them all. All right, the next one then is be salvo number 8. The existing single-family homes that you purchased along Riverside Drive, what's the ultimate intent of those buildings?
So those are on these parcels that Joe is pointing to right now. We call them the Flowers parcel and the Han parcel. So they're 2 single-family homes, one on each of those. And they are currently single-family residences, and the people in those homes from whom we purchased the properties, they have a right to stay there until October of next year, at which point then they will be vacant and ultimately taken down.
Okay. So your plan can reflect that?
Yes.
All right, next salvo number 11. It looked like some of the symbols around the tanks may have been what I would consider light standard type symbols. Are you proposing lighting in that area?
We are not proposing any lighting in this area. There's existing lighting that was previously developed. We're proposing to utilize that for our lighting needs associated with those structures. We are going to evaluate that to see if any of those, you know, can be removed, or if there's any type of adjustment that would need to be done, but we're going to do some additional evaluation, but no proposed lighting in that area. The proposal was to utilize the existing lights there. And we'll update the plan to clearly identify those as existing and what is to remain, or if there are some to be removed.
Okay, great. All right, next salvo number 18, the sewer comments. You will get us what your flow projections are? Because that'll be used for a variety of different things. The city's gonna have certified capacity, we'll have to do a planning module. Most importantly, the Apple Butter Road sewer line has some capacity left in it reserved for the township, so we'd like to see if this actually cuts into that number. And the city will eventually have to sign off on your leachate management system to tell us if okay. And is all that, I think, Joe, you reviewed all that and that's.
Yeah,
You will provide
we can provide all of that information. It'll be, part of the DEP application as we do the modeling. Leachate generation is based upon, landfill area that is exposed versus that which has intermediate grade, which has intermediate cap and final cap. So there's different stages to it. So that modeling needs to be prepared, analyzed to come up with what the total projected flow of leachate at any given time during the 20-year development of the facility. So that's in process and we can get that.
And I guess what we won't have are those projections for the preliminary land development, and we would suggest or request respectfully that that be a condition of the preliminary land development approval, that when we prepare those projections in connection with the DEP application, that we'll provide them to the township.
Okay.
Just a quick question on that. How does the leachate get to the tanks?
So the leachate is collected through piping within the cell on top of the liner. There's a primary and a secondary collection system, and it would be piped through pressurized piping, double contained piping to the tankage. And then from that tankage to an existing point on the landfill where it's conveyed via sewer to the TW.
Which is the wastewater treatment plant?
Which is the wastewater treatment plant.
Thank you.
Yeah, one of my comments was the warning line shown on there, and I have looked at the DEP plans for the northern realignment, and I see you've got a lot of detail on there on those lines, so.
Yes.
These plans should probably refer to that, the DEP plans that will eventually be prepared for this.
Yeah.
Rather than showing them on here, there's so much detail on those. That explains everything Link just asked.
Yeah. Okay. Which is through notations.
Through
reference
notation.
to-
So there's a pump station related to each cell, or?
There is a pump station related to each sump, not each individual cell. So in this instance, the vision currently is about 3 sump areas, so the low points of the cell. So, one located here, here, and possibly down in this location where the leachate collection lines would convey to that sump area through excavation. Then it is pumped through a lift pump out of that sump and conveyed to the leachate storage tank. But all of those lines are double contained pipes, conveyance, all meeting DEP's regulations. It's a leachate management system. It's a whole section of the DEP application that deals with that. And there are numerous regulations that we have to follow in dealing with handling of the leachate.
Okay, then in the stormwater management section, number 26, I had identified, you've already indicated that you will need to get the permits to remove those streams and wetlands, and that would be a condition.
Absolutely.
And I would note, it does look like the system of channels that you previously described and the lateral movement over to the stormwater basin will decrease the amount of water hitting Riverside Drive.
Absolutely, yeah. I didn't touch on that with this, but in this area, I think some refer to as the Narrows, this proposed development, because of the lateral movement of the water through benching, there will be a diversion of this upslope area that's currently conveying to the Narrows area over to the stormwater management facility proposed in hopes of alleviating some of that concern in that area by reducing drainage area too.
Okay, then under the zoning ordinance number 11, you touched on the existing driveway to the tank area, that you're gonna use that as an emergency access, and somehow, how do you intend to portray that, number 1 on the plan, and then number 2 operationally?
So I was gonna identify it, and flag it on here, then add some notations to it with regard to prohibition of any employees, waste trucks, any type of operations using that for access, so I was gonna identify it in that way. There's also a gate, which I believe exists and we will maintain to secure the
if that's there, I didn't see that on the plan, but the detail's very small in the area, so you wanna accent that. And what are you doing up in the new section where the road is being constructed between the tanks and the access road? That's probably a spot for signage too, so the trucks and employees don't leave from that.
Absolutely, yes, yes, good point. We can add some signage there.
Okay, and then zoning ordinance number 12, where we talk about the ordinance requires an earthen berm, and you're going to ask the township to not put the earthen berm in, leave the existing landscaping very similar to what you did on the previous plans. I don't know that, did Joe touch on that in his presentation?
I did not.
We did not, but yes, I mean, there's a zoning ordinance requirement that requires an earthen berm, but also there's a provision in the ordinance that says that council can make a finding that the existing vegetation serves the same purpose that an earthen berm would serve. And in this case, as well as with the northern realignment and the southeastern realignment, we requested similar exceptions from that based on the ordinance, because it would otherwise require the removal of existing trees to then put an earthen berm in, and the existing vegetation, and here in particular, with all of the conservation easements, that this serves as a better buffer than any kind of man-made earthen berm. So we're asking for relief from that provision.
All right, and then lastly, number 15, you will have to dedicate just shy of 93 acres for your excess resource utilization according to the ordinance and/or fees if council accepts that. I would note, Joe, during your presentation, you talked about that the woodlands, as the cells develop, you wouldn't remove woodlands until you develop a certain cell, which means that most of the woodlands will remain early on. They'll be taken down as the cells develop. I didn't see that on the plans anywhere, or can you put that on the plans? So that everything doesn't just get clear cut in the first 3 days and.
Yeah, we can give some thought, you know, we have the cell development schedule on some sheets that, you know, maybe we can add some notations or delineations of approximate edge of, you know, woodlands to remain, so we can work on trying to present something there.
All right, yeah, so that we don't have what I just said, that everything you don't need to cut down shouldn't be cut down.
Right, correct.
And I guess then the statement on the waivers you're requesting look just like the waivers you've asked for in the previous plans you brought in here, all because this is a self-contained landfill, private operation. And, I mean, I don't want to speak for it, but I just want the council to know that, I mean, planning commission to know that the waivers look just like the previously granted. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's what I had identified in terms of the planning comments. The others, as I had mentioned, are really technical engineering comments, which we can walk through. I mean, we haven't seen anything that we won't be able to address, and we can work on getting the plans revised to address all of those to Brian's satisfaction.
Does our engineer have any issue with any of the engineering relief that they're looking for?
No, as long as they're willing to acknowledge that they can address them, I think they are addressed.
Yes, we've looked through them, evaluated them, and we believe we can address each and every one.
Any questions from the commission? I just had a couple quick ones. So zoning comment number 13 is related to that, the streams on the property. So I guess any approval would be, because I mean, that's a variance otherwise, right? If you would approve it, they would need a variance because they're located within 100 feet of a bank of any stream.
If they do not get permission to remove and remediate the streams, then yes.
Right.
At that point, they would need a variance.
So that would just be a condition that they would either obtain that.
Well, if the condition eventually is compliance with the Hanover review letter, they need to show that they got the proper approval to remove those, or else they gotta come up with a different idea.
There was a comment about improvements to existing roads, and I guess in the traffic study identified some areas in need of improvement. I don't know if that was along the road frontage, talks about signage and drainage, and is noted that the report identifies shoulder signage and pavement marking observations, which could be incorporated into recommendations for improvements.
Yeah, I think I don't know that they necessarily need to do anything, but they need to clarify that in their traffic study as to whether they need to.
That's all I have. No other questions from the commission? We'll open it up to public comment.
Sign the list here. Victoria OC is the first one.
And just, we do have a 3-minute public comment that we're going to adhere to tonight.
Thank you very much. Is this on? Oh, I see. The red one?
Start.
Thank you. First, I was hopeful the planning commission had a good opportunity to see that first diagram or picture that was presented during the beginning of the presentation, and it showed the orange line that went around the overlay of the conservation areas on top of the current multi-municipal plan that Lower Saucon has adopted. Had the colors you were asking about, the blue and the green. If you take a look at that, you'll notice that there is, in the upper right-hand side, a large section of the proposed disposal area that is sitting over top an area colored green. And that green area on our own
It just went out.
maybe we're losing battery here, I don't know. But if you take a look at that plan, you'll see that it is not in conformity with our multi-municipal plan because we have a large section of disposal area sitting on top of an area that had been designated for rural agricultural or green open space. So I'm hopeful that you can take a look at that. I also am hopeful that you go and take a look at the properties in which they are proposing as conservation areas. If you take a look at them, and as they had indicated, some of you know they had attempted to do a western expansion in the past, and they had bought residential properties that were developed with homes and driveways and lots of features that you would not consider conservation area. So when you take a look at that, I think you'll see that there's a concern there that we're losing a large amount of acres of very pristine forest with lots of very special features, and we're replacing this conservation area with basically an abandoned home or a falling apart home or a foundation of a residence with weeds around it. The other thing important to note is this conservation area they're proposing to give you has a lot of conditions that they can operate and do different things on that land. So it's, I would say, in name only, and I think you should take a look at that, because if you compare what are the conditions of the conservation easements you're losing and the conditions that are currently on these lots that we don't have a third party for, not surprisingly, because they're not very environmentally sensitive areas, but if you take a look at them, I think you'll be concerned with all of the things they're able to do, including lumbering and doing all kinds of what would be landfill maintenance operations, I consider to be. I see that I have a 3-minute stoppage here, so I will respect that, but I also will say that I don't think it's appropriate in a planning commission meeting to be limiting comments to 3 minutes on a 275-acre proposal when you look at not only the landfill disposal area, but the supporting areas and the issues with these conservation easements. So I appreciate your look. I hope that you do detail and review your planning, you review their plan as opposed to the multi-municipal plan, and I think you'll see there's lots of problems. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Gordon DeGrasse, Gordon DeGrasse.
My item was scratched, so I'll wait till none agenda.
I'm not sure we have non-agenda items.
We do.
Yeah, we do?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, Don Wilder.
Louder, little talking. My question is for number 27, section 137-23M. Or maybe Brian, you could even help me out with this one, because you said that all the waiver requests were pretty much was neutral. Joe had even mentioned about the 3-to-1 benches. What is the landfill now as far as the slopes and the benches? Is it 3-to-1 or is it 2-to-1? It's all 3-to-1? And I asked that this commission make it pursuant that it is 3-to-1 because of stability. I think
It's
it
required
would.
by DEP regulation to be 3-to-1. Oh, sorry.
Thank-
No, that's good.
The 2-1, just to clarify, is for areas
Base.
outside the landfill disposal
The
area.
berms and the
The
storm
berms, the
basins,
basins.
slopes.
Yeah.
And you're saying the 3-to-1 is required by DEP?
For the landfill,
For the
and that's what I
landfill
picked, that's what I
disposal.
thought this was.
Got it.
So, I appreciate it, thank you.
Thank you.
Dan Alon, Lynn Hill,
Thank you. I have here a rendering of the area that we're talking about with the Lehigh River. This is a view from Bethlehem Township, looking at our township with a boat on the river and, you know, beautiful forest and a pristine looking river. So I just want everyone to be aware that what this plan is calling for would be changing the view you see here, and we would be looking at garbage. Also, and I don't think as planners you would want to sacrifice that valuable environmental resource just so we can serve as a repository for trash, mainly coming from the New York metro area. Having trash shipped from the New York metro area to here doesn't motivate anyone to reduce the amount of waste. It only perpetuates the problem that we have now. And we have 3 landfills in our county, and in total, only about 21% of the waste accepted at the landfills in this county comes from inside our county. I want to elaborate a little bit on the conservation easements, especially conservation easement area A, which is the area that you see along the river there to the north and east of that map. I encourage you to read this document in full, especially section 4, where it talks about restrictions. It names lots of restrictions, but then it names a lot of exceptions, things they can do in the easement area, utilities, installing electric, gas, and telephone, forest management, the cutting of trees, anything that would support stormwater management, drainage, areas, or there's also quarrying, which is prohibited except for stormwater management, stream restoration activities, and so forth. So, you know, there are more holes in these conservation easement documents than you could drive a truck through. also, you know, it allows for gas wells to be installed in the conservation area. Many, many things, so I encourage you to read this document because it is not a conservation easement as a normal person would recognize one to be. It doesn't help the wildlife, it doesn't help the trees, and it certainly doesn't help our view that we will be losing with this project.
All right, thank you.
Priscilla, do you have any other?
I just want a quick question for Link on that easement. Was that based on the Pennsylvania Land Trust model easement?
The conservation easements, which are not technically part of this plan application, they're separate from this plan application. They're shown on the plan for illustrative purposes, but the conservation easement document was modeled after the standard conservation easement that the township uses to preserve any property that we purchased with open space money. There are some specific exceptions of things that the landfill can do within those easements to monitor environmental stuff and to make sure that it's functioning correctly and do things that are positive for the environment. But otherwise, they're conservation easements like we've used for other projects.
Hi, Priscilla Deliano, I'm speaking as a resident. I heard someone say in the beginning of this meeting that there was revisions made. Are we looking at the most current plan? Like, are the plans presented to the township in September? Is that what's up there now, or is that what went to the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission?
Yes.
So all any changes that were made went, okay.
No changes. There haven't been any
Said there was
changes.
changes.
Joe said that this plan doesn't have all the detail on it that the actual sheet 11 or 19
Okay.
sheet was it?
I misunderstood.
Sheet 11, yeah.
Sheet 11 has more detail on it, but to put more detail on it makes it more confusing to understand what's going on.
Okay. So then we also talked about, and thank you, Haas, you stole my comment, about phase one, the environmental review. So that showed, it usually never shows anything for phase one when you do that for a DEP review. I'm hoping that there's a plan for a phase two investigation. I'm not sure if I'm using the right words DEP uses, but I think that the tank farm, because of the history, and we have no idea if there's been any spills in the contaminated ground and what you're gonna do with the contaminated ground, and it raises a lot of questions, so I really, really would hope that a phase two is investigated. Can you show me the outline where the tank farm, the property of 89 acres on that plan? Is it like embedded in there?
Yeah, this is the current property line here. To the north, then it goes around the perimeter.
Okay, thank you. And can you show me where the groundwater divide is on the existing property?
The
Or that
groundwater divide,
Yeah,
I cannot.
you cannot. Okay, so the nearest monitoring wells to that edge between that and the tank farm, can you show me where there are any monitoring wells?
The monitoring wells aren't shown on the land development plans, they'll be on the DEP.
Okay, are they shown somewhere on the plan that I could look at?
They'll be on the plan that's submitted to DEP.
Which we haven't seen yet, right?
That's correct, because we haven't submitted an application for the DEP permit yet.
Okay, long time ago, the well that was on, and Hans, you probably remember this from the landfill committee, because I never forgot this, TW9. It was on the edge of the property boundary, and it showed the highest level of chlorobenzene ever. And that always bothered me, and then for some reason, what happens to these wells that show good like stuff get run over, they can't produce anymore, and then we don't test them, and then, oops, we have to move them someplace else, and then we lose the data. So, I always wondered if there was other places that would test positive to chlorobenzene. So, anyway, so that's all I have to say, thank you.
Okay, that's all the names on the list.
Can I speak?
Ginger Petrie, yes, she's a resident.
Thank you. I only have a few
things to say. Ginger Petrie. I have a personal interest because my property borders what you have as the eastern edge, and the landfill now has purchased the properties on top of me, not only the tank farm, but going farther to the east, some also private properties that border mine. So I'm speaking as a person with a personal interest. If the earth were flat, this map would look really great. And as you guys sit there and you look at all your facts and everything with planning, I have done some subdivision. I'm familiar with Hanover. I know about BMPs and all the other things that are in engineering. But if you stood at the bottom of this mountain that we're planning on doing this expansion, you would see that it's a mountainside on about a 30% slope. It's totally covered with trees. So it's a forest with a beautiful stream at the bottom, with some little water seepage that comes out from the side of the mountain. There's a lot of rock, there's a lot of animals, and that water goes into the Lehigh River. Now a slope degree like that, you're talking about walls, as they do each of their sections, that are 50 feet high. So if you actually took the time to do a visual, this probably is 20 feet from the floor to the ceiling. And if we're gonna start at the bottom and we're gonna do 50-foot walls, then we're going to add trash, and then cover, and trash, and cover, and trash, and cover, until we have 50 feet. Then we're gonna move into the next section up. So we're gonna keep moving up the mountain, because we can't go from the top down. Now the trash has to also get there somehow. So there are roads that are gonna be coming through this, which means what if there is blasting, if there's rock? We've got a pipeline that runs right alongside of it. I'm only speaking from the person that's going to have to watch all of this happen. You've got a lot of people that are really into environmental studies. You're going to have to deal with the DEP. And at this point, by permitted use, you've taken off all the authority that you've had in the past. And all I'm gonna say to you is, before you say it's okay to do all this, because at this point, we're all assuming this is a go. Could you please go to the bottom of the mountain and stand there and think about what it's going to be to the young people that you know in 30 years from now when they call it a Superfund and your names were on the okay. That's all I have to say. Please consider this. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that's it.
Mr. Karochi,
You're not a resident of Lower Saucon Township, nor are you a taxpayer, so you're not recognized. Please.
hold on, sir.
Please sit down.
For the record, Mr. Solicitor.
Joe.
Frank,
Remove it,
my name's
send it to
Frank.
the varsity, remove the.
Remove?
No.
Sir, that'd be a poor move.
Frank, are you a resident?
No.
Note for the record that I attempted to speak and that I cannot.
Thank you.
That's all we had to do, Tom.
All right.
I'm a resident. Can I speak?
Sure, if you're a resident, name's not on the list, but if you want to speak. Okay.
Would you like me to put it on the list?
Tell us your name.
And your address.
No, not your address, just your name.
Just your name.
At Westfield University Avenue. I'm not sure that my question is.
What's your name again?
Ed Wetzel,
Can you spell the last name?
W-E-T-Z-E-L. My question is, and I didn't get the exact acreage, I think it was 86 acres, what's proposed now? How many years does that cover? How many years are we expected for that to be in operation? And when that ends, who is responsible for maintaining that property? Does it become township responsibility?
You can speak to that.
I think the landfill can probably answer that question the best, landfill representatives.
The estimated life is about 20 years.
About 20 years is what we believe at this point.
And in terms of responsibility, we have post-closure obligations as the permit holder for 30+ years. It has to be bonded with very specific bonding calculations that are submitted with the DEP permit. So we will be responsible as the permit holder, and everything will be bonded with DEP.
Okay, so all of this change is over 20 years of tax revenue? Is that correct?
The anticipated life of the Phase 5 expansion is about 20 years.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Zimmer?
Mark Ozimek, Motorsalkin. She just gave me an idea. When I used to work in the quarries, stone quarries, dirt quarries, whatever, when those quarries are done, they're required to put the land back the way they found it. That's one of their requirements. What is the requirement for the landfill when they're done with it?
I think as we had discussed before, there's a final closure plan that has to be approved by DEP. And then once the landfill is closed, we have ongoing maintenance obligations and it's bonded financially with DEP.
And those water quality monitoring requirements, those continue as well?
Absolutely.
Okay, and once you're closed and everything's taken care of and DEP approves all that, you remain the owner of the land, correct?
Yes.
And you keep paying your share of the taxes on the land, correct?
Yes.
Okay, good enough.
All right. Any other comments, questions from residents? Okay.
I'm gonna make a motion to recommend granting the waivers identified in the Hanover review letter dated October 19th, 2023.
Lincoln, unless you have something to add, I will second that motion.
Is that a good motion?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second.
Motion to recommend granting the waivers identified in the Hanover review letter dated October 19th, 2023. Right, that's the date?
Yeah, that's correct. October 19th. Any discussion on the motion? The only thing I would like to add is that based on the township engineer's comments, the motions requested are consistent with the use that's proposed and is consistent with what the waivers granted to the prior application.
And there is actually a Martin letter with a date requesting the license.
In the application package.
Yeah,
yes.
we should probably reference in the motion. So,
Just add to the motion, including the waivers requested as identified in the Martin review letter, date to be filled in by Jim.
yeah.
It's in the supporting documents.
It's in the submission.
Yeah. It's in the-
I'll add what Link said in my motion.
I'll second it.
If no further discussion, all in favor?
And then I'll make a second motion to recommend preliminary plan approval, subject to compliance with the October 19th, 2023 Hanover review letters. So to recommend preliminary plan approval, subject to the compliance letter.
Second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
So yes?
No further discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the approval of the August 24th, 2023 minutes. Got a motion for approval?
I was here, I'll make a motion.
I'll second that, I was here. All in favor of approval of the August 24th minutes? Aye. Okay, next item on the agenda is the public comments regarding non-agenda items.
Mr. Grass?
I'm Gordon Grass, Black River Road, resident 66 years, 58 on Black River. The fire lane coming up, I'm not against development, but I urge the planning commission to take a real serious look at stormwater management. Right now, what's coming down there is a good-sized stream. It's on the aptly named Black River. There's approximately 12 homes on Fire Lane right now. If we're gonna add 40, take away this pervious surface and put an impervious with 40 homes and roads and whatnot else, the amount of water might quadruple. If it's quadrupled, Black River is never gonna handle it. There was a project put into place, Brian engineered it, great project, but it was never really put in. They put in deeper gutters, which helped tremendously, yes. If we're gonna put 40 townhouses in, which again, I'm not against development, good, look good, there's a nice forest there now, but whatever. But the water, take a pretty seriously look, please. Maybe you need to incorporate a system there that brings back the Black River system, put the two together. That's all I have, thank you.
Thank you. I just want to say about the fire lane, because the plan was made public, that, we're required to review plans that developers or residents put before us. And, we can't control that when they come or what it is, until it's formally submitted, and we'll see. But all those concerns, I think, are valid concerns, and I hope, they're thoroughly addressed.
Yes, I appreciate that, Tom. And again, with the deeper gutter you put in that Brian engineered, helps tremendously. But if we're going to quadruple the amount of water coming down Fire Lane, whichever way it comes down, it isn't going to handle it. Okay, but yes, look at it seriously, please, and I'm sure you will. But I just wanted to re-emphasize that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Hearing none?
We want
So you a resident?
Affirmative, yes, I'm actually a resident on Fire Lane.
Okay,
And,
okay, say your name.
My name is Scott Levin, live at the top of Fire Lane. Been here about 5 years. Moved here from North Jersey to kind of find a quieter lifestyle. Starkly opposed to this expansion here on the Fire Lane. This is a residential neighborhood here. The traffic pattern is already pretty aggressive as it is, and speeding is a major concern. There's tons of wildlife on this property that you're talking about here. They float over to my property, believe it or not. But as it is, the traffic patterns were really unacceptable for the 12 houses that are on here, and we're looking to add, essentially, from what I can see here, 40 new homes, 42 new homes. That approximately puts another, say on the low side, 80 to 160 cars worth of traffic on the street here. To this gentleman's point behind me, the water is definitely unacceptable during almost any amount of precipitation on Black River Road. It just comes right from Fire Lane and right onto Black River, and in the winter, that becomes an ice bed. So really, I know you guys are going to do your due diligence on this, and the traffic pattern is definitely a concern. It's speeding on that road, and adding 40 new homes, 42 that's proposed right now. I'm sure there's a lot of adjustments to be made accordingly, but it's definitely a concern for my family. Today I lobbied a lot of my street neighbors and stuff like that, and went door to door, and I know that they are going to have many reservations with this expansion as well. So we are here for the stay on this one. So.
Having been through this before, a lot of times these developers come in and they're asking for the whole ball of wax.
Totally, I understand.
Whatever, usually, I'm not saying anything about this one specifically, but usually things are scaled back. It's a negotiating, not negotiating, but
this is but still, it's definitely, it's scary when you hear that 40 new homes on a street of 12 are going to be going up. That's, this is a residential neighborhood here. That kind of takes the residential, that small home feel on the street away from it. And that's kind of what I was looking for when I bought this place. And I know there will be many other people that come and speak behind me eventually about this. Is there a way to get notifications on when new updates or events come? Because as far as I'm concerned, I felt gaslit on this a little bit. I looked at the news articles this morning, and I had 10 hours I felt to prepare to give a speech here, essentially saying this is not something that we want in our neighborhood. So how can I get updates to go and know that, hey, someone's going to be coming here with more preliminary paperwork work to go and present to you guys, that we can know, that I can go and tell my neighbors here respectfully and say, hey, can we go and have a fighting chance at this? This is Boyle that from what I can see, that has come in and picked up this contract or is looking to develop here. They have bigger pockets than I do, but, you know, I would like to at least have a fighting chance to say as a resident here of what I would like on my street here. You know, this is a neighborhood that a lot of us know each other and we talk, and we like to keep it that way. So even if it's scaled back, we'd like to be scaled back to a residential, you know, single-family homes like the rest of the street is. So thank you
The
for the consideration.
planning agenda comes out when, usually the week before.
A week before the meeting.
The week before the meeting, it's on the township website.
You can sign up.
Was this on there from this?
It wasn't on the original one,
Okay,
then
because I
it was
saw that it was just
updated.
put on last
Yeah,
night
yeah.
or
And
Wednesday.
that's one of the reasons why.
And that's why it's alarming to me, as a resident, I feel like I got gaslit and I don't have an opportunity to prepare or say anything. And, you know, it's just, there's a lot of us that feel that way.
You can also put your email in to receive the agenda, so every time it would change, you would get an email to that effect also.
Okay, we have some assistance after that to just kind of lead me in the right direction so I can learn how to do that properly. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right, no additional comments. We'll move to adjournment. I'll move that we adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right, thank you.
And that's exactly what I'm trying to do. And my street is feeling fire now. They really are. So, that was you, Marshall. I appreciate that. It's a major concern. It's a small street here. I can see, you know, during the winter times, the traffic is, if people want to cut through. How would I know? How would any of this be? Just having a commercial structure. It's a luxury work. And that's what it is.
Thanks.
Now, these guys are responsible for the session, right? So, to me, that's kind of.
So I don't understand.
That's what all.
No, that's okay.
I really don't have.
You can pull that out.
I just want to say that we get, you know, the promise is 4,000 trees. Well, I mean, you know, everybody talks about. Take a walk along the river. Look at what's along the side.
I missed the first plow for the minutes or so. They just.
I mean, I deal with the DEP.
I'm sure it will, and I will be present and able.
I don't want to have
I spoke to, I went right down Black River too, I spoke to easily 14 people today.
It's not.
Yeah, but on Black River, there's a whole lot more that are feeling just so huge. Thank you. Appreciate you telling us the story. I know, you never know. So,
You bet you I forgot.
In the old days, when you were made out of wood.
I have seen some accidents. We've run out of and that is a major, and just going over there at the top of my hill, there's people that stopped at pass and do two cars.
Yeah, we
And that's
want
what
to-
are you gonna encroach on my property, fix my property, or widen the road now? That's, I'm having more problems with that. And so, yeah, and school buses, absolutely, every day, and you see back in our neighborhood, walking to school. In the snow, in the summer, in August, and all we have is the opportunity to keep. You can't hold me at the bush. Have a beautiful day. Thank you, nice meeting you, very nice. Yes.
All right, thanks for coming, guys. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you, Tim.
All right, we'll see you.
But he, my oldest son.
Good night, have a great night.
Thanks. He's even better than me.
You and
He doesn't have theory, but neatness. Yeah, it's so light, it's so good. Yeah, I made my comments. I don't build.
Don't want to forget those plans.
Oh, the old guy was great.
Great.
The old guy, I know that bank.
Yeah, I saw it come up and I said, buy it now. I said, we can address all the stormwater, we can put it right.
Absolutely, it went right across. No, did you see, that's that Tony Jack.
And they said, oh, that's a possibility.
Good for you.
Before we can even do anything for it, it was, I mean, it's sold.
So I'll have to work on doing that.
Okay, can Jack share it to the Facebook, to the YouTube channel?
Put the base in, but now it's still trying to.
That's the share.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I talked to him and he said.
Please, talk to him.
And I said, what about if we do some type of reason to get the basin down?
Who was the other girl sitting back? She left me to go.
Oh, you're great. Yeah, we needed you long ago. Oh, it's coming.
Yeah. Because she's sitting in the back there with a little notepad. No, I think she works with the dog. I wanted to get the girl that I wrote to the email to about taking a picture of the dump truck way back when.
Yeah, you keep it busy. Yeah, doesn't look too good.
At least Nick's home for you.
Yeah, he is. So you had the phone?